After what feels like an eternity, but in reality was probably just the worst year in my time on Earth, the movie gods have finally smiled upon us, opened the cinematic floodgates, and now here we are, with the ever-reliable Marvel Studios waiting to greet us like an old friend at the doors of the cinema. Proving the old adage that it really is better late than never, the long overdue Black Widow has finally arrived.
Family. Back together again.
You got fat.
Black Widow is directed by Australian director Cate Shortland, following Marvel's formula of tapping smaller indie directors to helm their bigger blockbusters. Scarlett Johansson returns as Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, and introduces Florence Pugh, Rachel Weisz, and David Harbour as new characters to the MCU. That makes this movie somewhat awkwardly placed, because Widow sacrificed herself in Avengers Endgame, but this movie actually takes place between Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. It gives this film a sense of melancholy, because we already know her fate. And while that does take a little bit of the tension out of Natasha's journey, it doesn't impact the narrative of this movie too much. It's less about the destination and more about the journey, which, for this film at least, is an interesting rumination on family and trauma, and acts as a fitting swan song for one of the founding Avengers. The plot of the film concerns Widow's path of revenge and redemption as she attempts to take down the Red Room, the Soviet Black Ops program that was responsible for turning her into the assassin she ended up becoming prior to her escape. This is definitely more of a techno-thriller in terms of tone. The film introduces a variety of new characters to the Marvel Universe, including Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova, another Black Widow, and Natasha's long-lost sister of sorts. She is easily the best part of this film. Pugh, hands down, owns every single scene she's present in. She's wonderful, and has a natural chemistry with Johansson. You totally buy these two as siblings. While Johansson has always played Widow as a master manipulator, ambiguous, cold, cool, and calm, Pugh's Widow is a raw nerve, emotional and funny and sarcastic. She's without a doubt a highlight in the film, and if we're not getting Johansson back as the OG Widow, Pugh's character is more than welcome to take up the Widow mantle. For sure, it feels like she's being set up for far more in the MCU, which I'm totally on board with. I also thought David Harbour was really great in his role as the Red Guardian. He was very, very funny, while also walking the line of being completely endearing and unlikable in equal measure. He chews all the scenery as a deadbeat dad, and Harbour is just a lot of fun full stop, so bringing him into the franchise is great. Likewise with Rachel Weisz, who has a wonderful deadpan delivery. She gets burdened with some of the exposition later in the film, but her rapport with Harbour is fantastic, and also very, very funny. The movie unfortunately does suffer from the same thing that most Marvel movies suffer from, which is a pretty forgettable villain. I know with total certainty that comic book fans are going to feel betrayed and let down by the film's main antagonist. Taskmaster is a pretty big villain in the comics, but is given a bit of a bait and switch here to further the development of Black Widow. The concept of the character is great, but it's not the same character from the comics, which for me was fine because I think it was handled pretty well, but I know that it is for sure going to piss many people off. Another thing that might disappoint some is that Natasha doesn't always feel like she's steering the plot of the film until all of a sudden, about halfway through, she is. Things are just happening to and around her before she's given some urgency at the midpoint. Until then, it's other characters doing most of the driving, and it feels a little odd considering that it's her movie, even though it doesn't always feel like her movie. The action scenes in CGI are something I've seen other people complaining about, but I, for one, thought that they were all extremely well done. While the action choreography wasn't as good as Winter Soldier, and Really, without the Russo brothers helming, I don't think any Marvel movie ever will be. I still think the action was more than serviceable. Some of the action set pieces were downright thrilling, and the film has far more action than you'd probably expect. I just wish so much of it wasn't spoiled in the trailers. These action set pieces are also executed far better than Marvel's other solo female flick, Captain Marvel. The CGI, unlike in that movie, is actually quite good, I thought. Some people have complained about it looking a little dodgy, but compared to some of the other big blockbuster budgeted films I've seen recently, this movie looks fantastic. Marvel's formula of action and laughs is sometimes a bit heavy-handed, but I think it works well to level out the darker tone of this movie. The plot is essentially about the forced enslavement of little girls, and as much as I wish it would have explored the trauma of that a bit deeper, I'm not surprised the overall tone was lightened. If I could compare this movie to anything, I wouldn't even look towards the MCU movies. It really felt like more of a James Bond or a Mission Impossible or a Bourne flick. Its title credits also deserve a special mention, with a stripped-back, low-key, gloomy cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit played over CIA-style briefings documenting the kidnapping and training of children to become Black Widows. It's really stylish and sets the tone for the film, but unfortunately, it also spoiled some of the actors that I didn't know were going to be in the movie, and more specifically, spoiled some of the villains. I kept waiting for those actors to show up, and when they didn't, it spoiled what might have been a nice surprise towards the end. If anything, the movie feels like fan service from start to finish. We even find out what happened in Budapest. This movie was a film for the fans, and after nearly 2 years without any theatrical Marvel movies, it really does feel like a warm welcome home. The film won't fulfill everyone's expectations. It can't. It was never supposed to be such a long wait between Spider-Man and this movie, and it can't hold that burden on its shoulders, nor should it have to. More and more it feels like people are wanting more depth and intellect from popcorn films, but what Black Widow lacks in social commentary, it more than makes up for in heart. It has some pacing problems, and if you look hard enough, you'll find the crack at the seams, but for me, Black Widow was a long overdue film for a character that fans love, and long overdue for Scarlett Johansson, an actress that has more than earned her dues in this role. If this is the last time we see this character, she's going out on a high note. Ultimately, I give Black Widow a B+. I love the more grounded approach to this film after the cosmic ramifications of the previous Avengers flicks. Even if the third act of this movie does go a little over the top, it's all very fun. The new characters are great, and if you stay past the credits, as all MCU veterans know to do, I don't think it will be long before we start to see them again. I had a blast with Black Widow, and it is great to be back in the cinema watching these movies again. Right before the film began, there was a segment with Stan Lee talking about the connections and bonds shared by people, and I'd be lying if I didn't tear up just hearing his voice. I'm very glad these movies are back, and I can't wait to be sitting in the audience, opening night of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. If you're like me, then I'm pretty sure I'll see all of you there again as well. Till then, later days.